What's up, math fans? You are deep into trigonometry by now. You know all about SOHCAHTOA, you know all about the reciprocal functions, you know how to rationalize fractions, and you've memorized the table of function values of special angles like 30, 60, 45, even the quadrantal angles like 0, 90, 180. So how much further can we go with this? Well, I'm glad you asked. Because have we dealt with negative trig functions yet? Have you gotten negative answers yet? Well, here we're going to explore. So first of all, something real simple like if I asked you for the sine of 30 degrees, you should now know without even going to the calculator that it's half. And I know that for various reasons that I've already proved in other videos. So if I know it's half, I can now move on to a more complicated question like sine of 150 degrees. Sine of 150 degrees, but 150 degrees is not found in a right triangle. So if only I had something to refer to. Oh, that's right. I have my reference angles, all right? So in another video you've watched, you learned all about how to find reference angles. And reference angles are found depending on what quadrant the original angle lies in. So if I'm looking at 150 degrees and I know that my angle opens at starting from 0, going counterclockwise, I'm already at 90. This way would reach 180, but 150 is going to stop a little bit short. So the terminal side would be right here in quadrant 2. And if it's a quadrant 2 angle, then my reference angle, well, I'll show it to you. So here's 0, way off the line, here's 0, and that is approximately 150, right? I opened up this way. What's a reference angle is the angle that is formed by that terminal side and the x-axis. So it's that little bit that's left over. That's why it's 180 minus 150. So my reference angle would be 30 degrees. So the sine of 150 can't be done, but the sine of 30 degrees can be done. And again, it's 1/2 because I already knew that for, again, various reasons. Now, the question is it going to be positive or negative? And I did not explain this in my other video about reference angles, so we're going to explore that today. Here's a unit circle. If I drew an angle and I created point P, the coordinates of point P depend on what quadrant you're in. So here in this quadrant, quadrant 1, both coordinates are positive. X is positive and Y is positive. And remember, coordinates in trigonometry, you can say x comma y, but it's more helpful to say cosine comma sine. And I'll be even more specific, cosine theta comma sine theta. So I'll put a theta right there. And cosine theta here. Okay, so what this is telling me is that the cosine of an angle in quadrant 1 is positive. The sine of an angle in quadrant 1 is also positive. But what if I had my angle terminating in quadrant 2? What are the coordinates here? Negative, positive. And that's important, and you'll see why. What if my angle terminates in quadrant 3? Then the coordinates would be negative, negative. And if it terminated in quadrant 4, then it would be positive, negative. So what does this tell me? Hopefully you wrote that down, or you can always pause it, and I will show you what it tells you. If I'm in quadrant 1, then it tells me that the sine of theta is coming out positive. It's telling me the cosine of theta is also coming out positive. But the tangent, wait a minute, how do you calculate tangent? Isn't it just sine divided by cosine? So a positive number divided by a positive number, the tangent will still come out positive. Okay, so this helps me predict the sign of my answer. What about here? Here, again, it's cosine comma sine, right? This is the cosine, this is the sine. So here, sine is positive, cosine is negative, and tangent is sine divided by cosine, positive divided by negative is negative. So tangent is negative. What about here? Both sine and cosine are both negative. So sine comes out to be negative, cosine comes out to be negative, and tangent is negative divided by negative, so you can predict that you'll get a positive tangent if the angle lands in quadrant 3. If the angle lands in quadrant 4, my sine is negative, but my cosine is positive. Okay, so I'll write that down. My sine is negative, my cosine is positive, and I'm going to now ask you what the tangent is. Negative divided by positive is negative. So if I have a fourth quadrant angle, I'm expecting a negative tangent. All that does is help predict the sine of your trig function values. Okay, so write that down. But of course, to summarize it, I'm going to ask you what function or which function comes out positive in quadrant 1. And the answer is all of them. They're all positive. A for all. In quadrant 2, what comes out positive? Just the sine. So S for sine. What's positive in quadrant 3? The tangent. And what's positive in quadrant 4? The cosine. C for cosine. Alright, so a quick way to remember all this 5-minute speech, this whole mess, a quick way to remember it, and I'll put it over here in my notes. All students take calculus. That will remind me of my signs. Okay, let's get back to work. So in number 2, I have to worry about where is 150 degrees, and it's in quadrant 2, and I know sine is positive here, so I'm going to get a positive sine 30, which is positive 1/2. Let's go to 210. Well, 210 is where? This is 180, 210 is going to be in quadrant 3. So sine of 210 is really the same as sine of 210 minus 180, which is the sine of what? What's 210 minus 180? 30? Again? Oh, what a coincidence. And the sine of 30 is again 1/2. I'm doing this on purpose. I'm not worried about the 1/2 part. That's easy. I'm now worried about the sine. So the sine of the sine, here's what I mean. The sine of 210, so you got to remember, where is 210? 210 lands here in the 3rd quadrant, but only the tangent comes out positive. So the sine of 210 is actually negative sine of 30. So that one's going to come out as a negative answer because it's in quadrant 3, where the sine comes out negative because the y coordinate is negative, which is what I said earlier. Think you can handle this one on your own? Let's see. So sine of 330 is really the sine of, where's 330? Isn't it in quadrant 4? 330 is going to land right there. So that's a new formula, or not really new because it's right here. 360 minus 330, and that's again sine of 30 degrees, and again it's 1/2, but again I know that's easy, so I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about the sine of the sine, which is it positive or negative or what? So since it's a 4th quadrant angle, only the cosine is positive, which means the sine is again negative, so I'm expecting the negative answer to this. I'm expecting the negative answer to this, which means my answer is actually negative 1/2. So not only you're finding the reference angle, but you're also figuring out if it's positive or negative. Finally, we mix it up. Cosine of 135. So you got to figure out what quadrant it's in. So that's the same as the cosine of 180 minus 135, because 135 is in quadrant 2. So 180 minus 135 is really the same as saying the cosine of 45 degrees. And hopefully you now know, if you check that table or you memorized it, the cosine of 45 degrees is radical 2 over 2. The question is it positive or negative? Since it's a 2nd quadrant angle, only the sine is coming out positive, which means the cosine will be negative. So I'd be expecting the negative answer to this. The negative answer to this, which means my answer comes out negative. Alright, let's go on. Cosine 240, where is it, and is it positive or negative? So I'm thinking it's the same as the cosine of, where is 240? This is 180, this is 270, so 240 is a 3rd quadrant angle. So that's going to be cosine of 240 minus 180, which is the same as the cosine of 60 degrees. And check your table, the cosine of 60 degrees, I hope, is 1/2. What a coincidence. Maybe I should have said the sign so we could finally get a different answer, radical 3 over 2. But that's okay. So now I'm just worried about is it positive or negative. So I double checked 240 was where? It's here. Only tangent is positive, which means cosine 240 would be coming out negative. I'm expecting the negative answer. So I get, again, negative 1/2. All right? Last one, real simple. I don't even need a number. I just need a quadrant. Well, technically it's a number. If the tangent is less than 0, that means it's negative. And the sine is also less than 0, which means that's negative. What quadrant would you expect to find your angle in? What angle would I be talking about if the tangent of that angle and the sine of that angle are both negative? Well, here everything's positive. Here the tangent's positive, so it can't be that one. Here the cosine is positive. Oh, wait a minute. You're saying the tangent and the sine are negative? So it can't be here, right? And it can't be here where the sine is positive. So that forces it to be here where only the cosine is positive and these two are negative. So this is describing a quadrant 4 angle. All right? Any questions, leave them in the comment section. Thanks for watching. See ya.